Hey everyone, it's Michelle at Icon Systems here. Welcome. I am working on getting my slides up here. There we go. Let's try that. Okay. I don't usually do slides, but I decided to get fancy for you guys today, so you're welcome. Yeah, we won't stay on slides too long though. We're mostly going to be in the software and going through a few different things today. Before we get started, just to make sure that everybody can see my screen, if you can't, it might be minimized or hiding behind another window. So if you go to the very bottom of your computer, like your taskbar, there should be a GoToWebinar icon. It's usually a little orange flower or a blue flower. And if you click on that, that should pop up so that you can see my screen and my slides as we're going through the demonstration here. And I am recording the call today, and I'll be sending out a recording to everybody who registered. So if you have to head out early or miss something, you know, don't sweat it. We'll be able to go back and you can watch the replay. And so I usually have it out within a couple of days. It takes a little while for the videos to process and get them uploaded on YouTube, but I will have those out to everybody as soon as I can. So if there's somebody else in your organization that you wanted to share it with that maybe couldn't be on the call today, that's a good thing to pass along as well. Just so that I know, by a show of hands, and if you're not familiar, if you haven't been on one of these GoToWebinars before, you've got your GoToWebinar control panel. And if you can't see it right now, there should be a little orange arrow that you can click on that'll either expand it or collapse it. And that will allow you to see all of your options there. There's audio. When we get to the Q&A at the end, you'll be able to type in questions and that sort of a thing. There's a little hand raise feature there where you can just raise your hand. So if you can hear me, if you're here, say hi, raise your hand. If you want to type in the chat box, let me know your name, where you're from, what the weather's like today. We're in Minnesota and it is a gorgeous summer day out. Some people complain about the heat, but as long as it's not blizzarding, you're not gonna catch me complaining about the weather. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Oh, good. Rachel's here from Boise. Hi, Rachel. Sunny and gorgeous, not too hot. Oh, I love days like that. Perfect. Perfect. Awesome. All right. Oh, yeah, everybody's saying hi. Barb and Don, hi. I think I talked to you on the phone earlier, didn't I? Hi. Mike from Cedar Valley, Iowa. Yep, great weather. Everybody is loving the summer up here. Hi from Georgia. Hi, Karen. I bet it's warmer down there. Jen from Waterloo. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, it's a gorgeous summer day. All right. Well, I appreciate, now that I know how gorgeous it is, I appreciate everybody being here on the webinar today and joining us. Yeah, it'll be good. Okay, so today we are going to cover, we're going to cover a fund accounting setup. So that is going to be, oh, and I can't advance my slides here. This is how you know I'm a real person and I'm not just going through the motions. Okay, so today we're going to cover setting up the fund accounting module. So we're going to go setting up your accounting funds, your chart of accounts, vendors, entering your beginning balances. If we get to it at the end, we'll go through your first bank statement reconciliation. We'll just have to assess that at the end and see how much time we have and how many questions people have on different things. If I don't happen to get to it, we're going to be doing another webinar next month in September. And that one's going to be fund accounting day-to-day operations, right? So this one is just the setup. If you're in a brand new account, you haven't set up anything yet, that's where we're starting today. Next month on our live webinar, we're going to go through writing checks, recording deposits, the AR and AP modules, right? So putting in receivable invoices, putting in AP bills and paying those, all of that sort of a thing. So no worries. If we don't get to the bank reconciliation today and we run out of time, we'll get to that next month for sure. But just because your first bank statement reconciliation is a little bit different than the other ones because of your beginning balances when you're first on the system. All right, I do have a couple of handouts on today's webinar. The first one is the Fund Accounting Setup Guide. And if you don't have that already, I highly recommend, you don't have to do it right this second, but have something that you can take notes on. If you do have a copy of it printed out, we'll be not following along word for word with it, right? I'm not going to read it to you because that would be boring, but we'll be following along pretty closely. So that'd be a good place to take notes as well. Otherwise, if you don't have a copy, you can download it. I have it in the GoToWebinar control panel in the handout section. Otherwise, when you're logged into your Icon Systems account, there's that Getting Started button in your top right-hand corner. It's kind of next to where you log off. And under there is actually a whole list of setup guides, right? There's one for each module in the system. So there's one for membership. There's one for contributions. This one is the fund accounting setup. There's one for payroll as well, right? And different partner integrations. So those are really good resources, especially if you're new to the system, to print out, take notes on, and keep as a desk reference as you're getting everything started. All right, so again, what we're going to cover today, I've got another handout for you, which is a free ebook. We're going to go through organization setup and personal preferences. Those are just some settings in your account that are good to know where those are. And then we're going to go through the actual setup of a system. We're going to set it up from scratch. So we'll enter in vendors. We're going to enter some items and customers in AR. We're going to talk about cash versus accrual methods in accounting. And if you don't know what those are, that's okay. We'll cover that. We're going to set up a chart of accounts and your accounting funds. And so once we have all of that set up, then we can actually go and enter your beginning balances, any uncleared transactions, right? Checks that hadn't cleared or deposits that hadn't cleared yet. And then, like I said, if we have time, we'll get to the first bank rec at the end. Otherwise, if we have a lot of questions on other things, I might go in a different direction. So we'll get a feel for where everybody's at the end. And then a quick disclaimer here, right? I'm not providing professional advice here, right? I'm not a CPA, I'm not a lawyer, real estate advisor, anything like that, right? We're just using examples in here, and each church, each organization is a little bit different, right? So if you have specific questions, it's good to consult a professional to see what the best fit is for your particular situation. Once you get that information from them, go ahead and come back to us and say, hey, Icon support, I just talked to my accountant. They said I need to do this to get us adjusted in the system, and we will 100% show you how to do that, right? So have to put that in there. These are just all made up numbers and scenarios here. Your situation might be a little bit different. Okay, that being said, we are going through how to do stuff in the system today. If you're brand new to accounting, or maybe you've got an accounting or bookkeeping background and you're new to fund accounting for churches and nonprofits, this is a really good resource for you. It doesn't talk about how to do stuff in the system, right? That was our last handout. which is the fund accounting setup guide. This talks about the fund accounting from more of a conceptual level, right? So it talks about the principles and the different reports and the methods that we use for the accounting. So that's a really good resource. It's a quick read, right? Like, don't be intimidated by the word ebook. It's just a quick little PDF download. And that, again, is available in your handouts in the GoToWebinar control panel. Or if you can't find that for some reason, just shoot me an email. I can send you a link to it. It is also just available on our website at IconCMO.com under the resources tab. So you'll be able to find that there as well. All right, so that's enough of the slides. Let's get into the system and go through some of the setup. Okay, so I am logged into a sample church right now, Peace Church, and I already cleared out all of the accounting transactions in here, so we're basically starting from scratch, right? So if I go to my reports and I run a balance sheet, and again, we're going to use the balance sheet as like an example just to see what's been posted in the system today, but don't worry so much about what reports we're running and when. We're going to get to that in the next webinar and go through some of the reporting that you're going to be using on a daily basis, right? But just for demonstration purposes, here's my balance sheet right now. It's blank. There's nothing on it. So that's what we're going to do today, is get all of our accounts set up and our funds so that we can enter beginning balances in here and have a balance sheet to start with. Okay, so organization setup. So if you go to the organization tab on your menu, this is basically your settings, right? Lots of different settings for different areas of the system. Mostly what we're going to be working on is information. So this is where we covered this on the previous webinar as well, when we were talking about membership and contributions, right? Filling in the organization's information and uploading a logo. But this is also where some accounting information is as well. So like if you want to put in like your federal ID or state ID, that sort of a thing. The important ones are, for our accounting purposes today, is your first month in your fiscal year. By default, it'll be January. If you are on a fiscal year other than a January calendar year, you'll want to set that to July or whatever month it is for your first month in your fiscal year. And then we'll get to more on this later, but just so that you know where it is your beginning balance date, right? And I'm actually going to change this to be 12/30 of 2018, and we'll talk about that later, about why that is. And then there's also reversing journal type and first month for giving fiscal year, but that's getting into the contributions module. So for now, really the two settings we're concerned with are your first month in your fiscal year and your beginning balance date. So if you need to adjust those, go ahead. So for example, like if we were starting on a July fiscal year, I would want my start date to be June. I would do June of this year, right? But we're going to keep it on the calendar year for this demo. And then the other settings that you're going to want to pay attention to, so those were global settings for the whole account, right? If you go back to organization on your menu and under preferences, click on personal, these are your personal settings for your user ID. These aren't shared by anyone else, right? It's the important thing that we're going to be using here for the fund accounting module is the fiscal year to work with. And this is very important, right? Because whatever you're posting in, when you're posting entries, you need to have it set to the appropriate fiscal year. There's also different date formats to use. So month, day, year versus day, month, year. So if you're in the US, you're probably used to month, day, year. If you're in Canada or another country, your preference is probably date, month, year. And then, yeah, down here, accounting preferences. Most of the time, you're not going to have to touch the default date to use, right? Because you want it to be today's date. It'll just automatically update that every day based on the dates on your computer. If for whatever reason you're going back and backdating a lot of entries to a previous date, it might be helpful to set that to something else so that you don't have to adjust it every time you're making an entry and then change it back when you're done. And then there's also a default fund to use, right? So we don't have our funds set up in here, but once we do, you'll be able to choose the default fund that you want to use. So if you're usually writing checks off of a different fund other than the general fund or things like that, you'll be able to customize that setting. Okay, going through my checklist to make sure I don't skip anything. All right, so now we're going to actually set things up. So we'll start with the easy stuff first, and we'll set up our vendors. So we'll be in the AP tab and the vendor list. And I've got a couple of vendors already set up here, but we'll set up one more so you can see what it looks like, right? So let's do, we'll do utilities for City of Moorhead. And you can fill in the address if you have it, right, and other contact information. There's a little line down here that says track 1099s. I would leave that set to yes by default. When you get to the end of the year, you know, if you don't need to create a 1099 for a particular vendor for whatever reason, that's fine. You can opt not to do that. But if you have it set to yes, you've always got the option. You know, if you change your mind later, you can always come set that back to no if you're like, I absolutely 100% never need to send, you know, this person or this vendor a 1099, and that's just fine. But like I said, it's totally fine to just leave that set to yes. It doesn't mean you have to send them a 1099 at the end of the year. And then the other important thing in here is your default expense. And we'll get to our chart of accounts in a bit here, but the nice part is you can set an expense account that this vendor will be using by default. So I'll choose, let's see what would fit here. We'll do water. We'll say it's the water bill for the city. But you can choose one of your expense accounts. Now, when we're entering bills or cutting a check, you can always change that later, but the nice part is it fills it in for you. So you don't, again, have to set it up every single time you're entering something in there. So we'll go ahead and save that. So basically what you do is you rinse and repeat, right? You come in here, you have all your vendors, your people that you send checks to, get invoices from, set them up here. If you've got a lot of vendors, it might be a pretty daunting task to set up the system and enter in all of your vendors in from scratch. So if you just want to enter those as you go, right? Like as you get bills and just come set up the vendors a handful at a time, that's totally fine, right? Especially if you're on a stricter timeline for setting up the system. Sometimes that's helpful to just say, okay, I'll get what I need in here for now, and then I'll enter in the other vendors as the invoices come in. So the other side of it then, and everybody might not be using the AR module, right? But if you are, we'll cover it, is your customer list. So typically the churches we see using AR are ones that are sending out invoices because they have a daycare or a preschool or you know, extensive facility rentals, that sort of a thing. So you can set up your customers in here and send them invoices out of the system, right? So let's say, for example, we're setting up a preschool and we'll put in a family here. All right, so we'll set that up. You can put in an email address too if you'd like, because it's also possible to email invoices, but for now we'll skip that part so you see that here, right? So if you are using AR, you'll come here and set up all of the customers in here. Again, it might be that thing where you set it all up at once, or you might come back here and just do a couple at a time as you're sending out invoices. And then the other part in AR is your items, right? So if we're going with the example of like a preschool or a daycare, right, we can set up different items. So we would do, we'll do full-time preschool. Wow, my fingers are not hitting the right keys today. Good thing for spell check. All right, do that. We'll put that as there. I don't know if I have like a particular preschool one, so we'll just leave it set to that, right? And then you can put in an amount, and we will add that. So you go ahead and set all of that up there, right? So pretty straightforward. Like I said, we're not going to get too far into this to actually posting invoices and receiving payments and deposits, or, you know, cutting checks, anything like that today. But just so that you know, especially when you're first setting up the system, it's nice to get some of this setup work out of the way so that you can jump in and put in your entries. Okay, now that being said, so we were just in the AR and the AP modules. Not everybody is going to be using those. So there is if I can send out this link in the chat so that you can click on it. Here we go. So go ahead and save that link for later. But this is a blog post that we wrote about the accounting methods, right? So there's cash basis and there's accrual basis. So long story short, the majority of churches are on a cash basis system, right? Which means you get an invoice in the mail, you cut a check and pay the bill. That's that. It's as simple as that, right? There are some churches and organizations that use accrual basis, which means that you receive an invoice, you record it in the system, and then at a later date, you go and write all of your checks against those invoices and you sort of batch them together. Now, this should be in your organization's bylaws, right? Like it's not just oh, I woke up this morning and I decided I wanted to do accrual-based accounting, right? Like this is a big deal if you're going to switch. So if you're not sure, go ahead and check, but it's more than likely that you're just using a cash basis. Usually larger organizations are, like I said, the ones that have daycares and preschools and that sort of a thing using the AR. They like using the accounts payable module. They go in hand with that. We're not going to get too far into all of the details of this today, but that link that I just sent out, this is a good post to read for later. It talks about the two different methods, cash basis versus accrual, and then which one is a good fit for you and your organization. And there's even, when you get to the bottom here, there is a cash accounting video series, right, that talks about cash accounting, accrual accounting, compares the two so that you can see specific examples and understand a little bit more about how they work. All right, so getting back to the setup, we are now going to look at the chart of accounts. So that is under the General Ledger tab, GL, and chart of accounts. Now, when you've got a brand new account and you first log in here, you're going to get a little pop-up window. And I've already been through this. This isn't a brand new account, right? I had an existing one and I just cleared out the entry so I could start from scratch for the webinar. But you're going to get a pop-up that's going to ask you, do you want to load the default chart of accounts? If you're a brand new organization, or if you're coming from, pen and paper or Excel, something like that, I highly recommend, or if you're just reorganizing your chart of account structure, I highly recommend doing that so that you've got a good template to start from. You can always, so there's a handful of required accounts, right? Like accounts receivable, you can't edit that one or delete it, right? Because that would break things in the system. But like all of the assets, revenues, expenses, that sort of a thing, if there's one that you're not using, as long as there's nothing posted to it, you can sure delete it, or you can always rename it something different or rearrange the organization within the sub account. So even if you start from the default template, you can customize it right to your own preferences. If you already have an existing chart of accounts, you're coming from another accounting software system and it's perfect and you absolutely love it, go ahead and just say no to that and cancel that pop-up, and you'll basically just be given the default accounts to start, and then you can build all of your own accounts from scratch. So you can see here, like I've got some assets, right? Like a checking account, petty cash, or certificates of deposit. I will point out one thing here. If you've got like a money market or a savings account or some kind of investment account that has a significant amount of activity on it, you're doing a lot of deposits, or sometimes you can even write checks out of those types of accounts, anything other than just an interest or a fee every once in a while. What you can do is you can actually set that up as, you'll see there's this category detail here, right? Is you can set those up as a checking account. I'm going to show you how to do that here. So we'll have assets and bank, and we'll set it up as a checking account. Now I can call it savings, right? So you could do like that. So you can see here, I've got my Bell Bank savings, right? And then maybe I want to rename this one. If I've got multiple checking accounts, it's good to put like the last four account numbers, or if it's at a different bank, specifying which is which, so you can tell your accounts apart. So you can clearly see I've got checking and savings, and those names are what are going to show in my reports, but they're both set up as checking accounts in the system. Now what that does is it unlocks some extra features for you in the banking module. So you can do things like cut checks off of that account, record deposits to that account, reconcile it. That's very important, right? If you want to be able to reconcile an account. And then there's also a special ledger for the checking accounts in the banking module as well, right? So if you want to be able to use all of those features for a particular account, go ahead and set that up as a checking account right off the bat. If you do set something up as a savings account or money market or something like that, you can't change that category detail after the fact. So that's something to keep in mind. Otherwise, if you do have, like I said, a money market or savings or investment account that doesn't have a lot of activity on it, right? Like a couple times a year, you might be recording some interest and fees. That's easy enough to just hit with a journal entry, and you don't necessarily need to reconcile it, because you can just quick glance at a report and see, oh, there was my 4 entries for my quarterly interest this year, right? So just depending on your situation, that might be a better fit for that account type. So you have all of your bank assets. You'll also have fixed asset as well, right? So if you have like any buildings or equipment, land, things like that, you'll be able to set those up in here. And then you'll have all of your liabilities. So we've got accounts payable and credit cards payable by default, right? If you're using the payroll module, that's the other nice part about loading the default chart of accounts. And we're going to do payroll in October, is going to be our payroll webinar. The nice part is if you're using the payroll module, you've got all of these liabilities already set up for you, so you don't have to build all of those from scratch. And then we'll get into revenues. Again, those are customized, right? So like I just have one main contribution revenue here, right? So if I want to add some different types, can go to add new account, right? And then I can either just add different categories in here, or I can actually tuck them underneath this. So if I wanted to get more specific on what type of contribution revenues I had, right, I could do offering revenues. I could do right, different things like that. Or I could even do like youth group, building fund, right? And I'm just going to tuck them all under here. So you can see now under my contributions heading, I've got building fund, offering revenues, and youth group, right? So I can categorize deposits towards those different revenues specifically. And then I've got a fundraisers as well. So that's separate, coming through the contributions module. And then same thing for your expenses. If you load the default, you're going to have a lot of expenses here. Like I said, pretty good start. You obviously can customize it from there, adding new accounts, deleting ones you don't need, or rearranging the sub accounts. So an example of that is like for my local charities, right? Maybe I had specific local charities that we're tracking expenses for, right? So if I did add new accounts, I'm going to go to expenditures. I could tuck this under local charities and do food pantry. And then that one would go, so it goes 1, 2, 3, right? I can go up to 3 levels deep with my sub accounts. And then once we get to the reporting here, those sub accounts are all going to subtotal on the reports, right? So it's a little bit more organized versus just having a huge list of revenues and expenses, and they're not really grouped together in any particular order. Now you can rearrange these at any time, right? So if I decided, oh, I kind of want food pantry by itself, I don't want it, tucked underneath of the local charities, I can tuck it back out and just put it under charities expense, right? So those are easy enough to kind of swap around, and they might change from year to year too, right? As things change, you can reorganize those. So that is how you set up your chart of accounts. And then the next step before we enter in our beginning balances is going to be setting up our funds. And that is going to be under general ledger, funds, and then in our fund maintenance window. And you will have a general fund by default. I've also got a capital campaign set up in here. So we'll add a couple of more. We'll do building fund. And this one is going to be restricted, right? And the restricted, unrestricted are donor imposed restrictions. So if somebody gives you a check, says, hey, go ahead and spend this on whatever you'd like within the church, that is unrestricted money. If somebody gives you a check and says, this is for the building fund, that is restricted money, and it needs to go towards the building fund, right? So we'll go ahead and add that in. We'll do another one for the youth group. Here, same thing, that's restricted. So you've got all of our funds here. So again, you just go down the list, set up all of your funds. Each church, each organization is a little bit different, right? But you've probably already got those categories set up that you know that you have balances that you're tracking. Okay, so the next step then is entering in your beginning balances. So that is back on your menu under General Ledger, Funds, and then Beginning Balances. And so what you do to start is you choose your bank account, right? So I have my Bell Bank checking that I set up. And oh, you know what? I have beginning balances in here from before. I'm sorry, I thought I cleared them out. Let me do that. Okay, I'm just going to clear these out so you can see what it looks like from scratch. There we go. Okay, so at the top, in this top line, you put your total balance of your account that was on your bank statement, right? So you take your, since we were starting this January 1, we're taking our December 2018 bank statement for this, and we would put how much money was in our checking account and save that. And then what you'll do is take any unreconciled deposits, right? So deposits you know you've made since that bank statement that hadn't cleared yet, right? So deposits that you made in December but didn't clear until your January statement, and you can enter those in here. Now with these ones, the dates I would use would be, if you remember, back to when we were in the organization window, is that we put our beginning balance date as December 30th. So all of these transactions, the date that they actually happened isn't important. I would just put them all under December 31st. That way, when we're running our balance sheet, we can see, okay, my beginning balances are on the 30th, and then any outstanding transactions were on the 31st. And if there's an issue with any of those balances, right, it's easier to go back and say, oh, well, it was right on the 30th when I just had my balances in there. But once I entered my outstanding checks and deposits, that balance is off, so something is incorrect there. And it just makes it easier to track it down if there's an error in those beginning balances. So we'll put these in with the 31st. We'll put in a couple in there. Outstanding deposits. And then we'll close that, and we'll do the same thing with unreconciled checks, right? And you can even put the check number in here to make it easier to reconcile. Again, we'll put those in with the 31st date. And we'll put in a couple of checks. There we go. So you would just go down the list. And again, these are checks that you wrote in December that hadn't cleared on your December statement yet, right? So that way they're there when you're reconciling your January statement, or even if it takes until February to clear, right? If it took somebody a while to bring that to the bank, you'll have all of your outstanding checks here. Then the last step that we'll do in here is we'll divide this balance up between all of our different funds, right? So we've got all of our funds that we set up back in the previous step in our fund maintenance window. I've got a general fund, building fund, capital campaign, and youth group, right? So I know I've got 78, 65, 93, right? Plus the deposits minus my unreconciled checks, right? So my total balance is 85, 2003. So what I need to say is how much of this belongs to each of my funds, right? So maybe we know that the building fund has $2,000 in it, and capital campaign, maybe we just started the capital campaign and there's nothing in it yet, so we're just going to leave that zero. And then the youth group has $500. So then the rest of it, then the remaining balance belongs to the general fund, and we'll put that in there. So now I've got zero left to distribute, and all of my money in my checking account is spoken for. Now, basically what you do is you go ahead and rinse and repeat this process for each one of your bank accounts, right? So if the church only has one bank account, that's easy at this point, we're done. If you've got multiple bank accounts, like if you remember we had a savings account, we can go ahead and do the same thing there, right? So let's say we had some money in savings. We'll do that. Maybe the money in the savings is only building fund money, right? So in that case, we don't have to divide it up between different funds. It's all going to be, oops, missed a zero there. There we go. It's all going to be in the building fund. So that's pretty easy to divide it up that way. And then you can do the same thing if you have any fixed assets, right? Like buildings, things like that. You put in the value there. Or liabilities, right? If you have maybe like a mortgage or I've got a note payable for a building fund, right? So if I've got a mortgage outstanding there, I could put that in here. So let's say we've got a mortgage for $300,000, and we want to put that. Well, yeah, we'll leave that in the general fund, right? And then, oops, did I put it wrong? Oh, I do need that negative. There we go. That's right wrong. Note payable there, and then maybe we've also got a fixed asset for the building, right? So we can put in that same amount there. Let's say that that's actually $350. We want that in the general fund as well so that it matches. There we go. So like I said, just easy process, just rinse and repeat for all of your bank accounts, any assets or liabilities that you have out there. Get all those balances from your bank statements. And then when you're all done, we can go ahead and post them. And now at this point, we can go look back at our balance sheet. And we should have balances on there now. So you can see here, I've got my checking account, savings. I actually had a CD and another savings account in there from before. Those weren't our new beginning balances that we put in here today. You can see here is my building, my mortgage that was against that building, the note payable. And then the neat part is at the bottom here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it better, is I've got my net assets, right? So net assets is taking all of my assets at the top. This is going back, like if you've ever taken Accounting 101, right? Your accounting equation is assets minus your liabilities equals, and in the for-profit world, we call it owner's equity, right? But nobody owns the church, so we call it net assets. So if we added up all of these assets together and then subtracted out all of these liabilities, we would get our net assets, or net worth, equity, different terminology depending on right who you're doing accounting for. So in the church, we call it net assets. Now, the special thing about churches is we had all these funds set up, right? So you're actually going to have a net assets tract for each one of these funds. And so I can even drill down and say, okay, well, I've got $22,000 for the building fund. Like, where is that money? Like, is it in bank accounts? Is it assets? Are there any liabilities outstanding for that? So I can run back and grab the same balance sheet just for my building fund. And you can see here, I've got some money in checking, some money in savings, right? So we can verify after you enter your beginning balances, it's a good idea to come here, run your balance sheet, make sure not just all of your totals added up together on your overall balance sheet, but also each fund individually looks the way that you're expecting. Because it's a lot easier to go through that right away and catch those mistakes and adjust your beginning balances before you start doing entries into the system. All right, so we have just about 15 minutes left. My voice is getting froggy, so I'm going to take a chunk of water here. And then I'm going to scroll through some of the questions just to see where everybody is at, what kind of questions people have. If you have something, like I said, we're not going to go through like day-to-day entries here, but if you have a question or would like additional clarification on something we went through today, go ahead and type in a question. Again, if you missed the first part of the webinar, so on your GoToWebinar control panel, you might have to expand it or collapse it. There should be a little orange arrow you can click on. There'll be a questions tab. And when you click on that, you can type in a question and send it directly to me so that I can see your questions. So if we have a lot of questions, we'll go through those. If not, then I'll circle back and we'll do a bank reconciliation so that you can see what that first bank rec is going to look like. Oh, there is a really good question here. Okay. So they're asking, we use Icon for recording contributions, right? So entering in all of those deposits, giving people credit for it, and getting statements at the end of the year, right? So the question is will the funds that we use there carry over to the accounting side? That is a really good question. So basically how that works is you've got two different lists of funds in the system, right? You've got your contribution funds and you've got your accounting funds, right? So the contribution funds are under the contributions module, right? Because everything's contained in its own module. And under management in the funds and pledges window, right? So we have our list of funds here. If you want to get a printout of this, you can go to your contribution reports. And there's one called list of all funds, no dollar amounts. And this one's going to give you a list of all of your contribution funds. So if you're taking notes, that's a good report to know. So we were in the contribution giving report, and it's called list of all funds, no dollar amounts. So those are your contribution funds. You also have your accounting funds, right? And so those are under your general ledger. And those were the ones that we set up in our fund maintenance window. If you want to get a list of them that you can print, those are in your GL report. And it is called fund list. So again, if you're taking notes, GL report, fund list. And this is a list of all of your accounting funds. Now, the majority of these are probably going to be one for one, but your fund list on the accounting side versus the contribution side might not be identical. So things like that would be, right? So like, let's look at my contributions list again, right? Like I've got a capital campaign here, right? That's obviously going to link up to my capital campaign on the accounting side. Same thing, general fund goes here, contributions to general fund on the accounting side. Maybe something like disaster relief. Let's say that there's, you're collecting money for a natural disaster, there's a hurricane, something like that, right? That's going to be this is getting a little bit more complicated, right? But that's going to be a pass-through fund that you're taking on behalf of another organization. So you're not necessarily going to be creating an accounting fund. On the accounting side, that's just going to get jumped into the general fund. And then you'll cut a check out to, the other organization that you're sending that money to, right? So you might want to have different names on the contribution side. For example, like not all churches call it general fund. On the contribution side, they might call it general offerings or tithes and offerings or pledges, right? Again, each church, each denomination has a little bit different terminology that they like to use. So the nice part is you can customize that, but then it all can go, funnel into the general fund or funnel into, another example with that would be like memorials or missions, right? So on the contribution side, you might want to have memorials John Smith or whatever the person's name was, right? That way when the donor gets their statement, they can see, oh, that went towards my loved one's name, it's personalized, they can see that there. Once it gets to the accounting side, maybe that just gets dumped into a general memorial fund and it doesn't need to be specific for a person. If there's a special situation where somebody gives a memorial in somebody's name and it's supposed to be for a dedicated purpose, right? That's another story. But it's just a way where you can track that and have a little bit more detail on the contribution side without having to, clutter up your accounting system with unnecessary information. But they do link up together, right? So when we go back into our funds and pledges window on the contribution side, so like, for example, we'll take our capital campaign. Once we select that, we can choose accounting link. Oh, and I have it turned off. Let me go turn that on. This is a good note to know too, right? So organization preferences in the church membership window. I can turn my accounting link on or off here. And once I turn it on, I can go ahead and set that up. There we go. So these are all of my things that I just set up on my accounting side, right? So accounting fund affected. This is where I was saying this situation is going to be one for one. My capital campaign contributions fund is going to go to my capital campaign accounting fund. Banking, this is where you choose the bank account that money is going to get deposited into. That's usually pretty straightforward. And then the contribution revenue, again, this is from the chart of accounts, right? So my options here, I've got building fund, offering revenues, youth group. You know what? None of those really fit here. Maybe I want a special capital campaign revenue account, right? So that's where we can go back to your general ledger, to your chart of accounts and say, all right, let's add this in here. We'll put in a revenue, put it under the contribution subheading, and add in capital campaign. Now, when we go back and refresh this, I can choose capital campaign as my revenue account, right? So, like I said, generally they match up one for one, but that's not always the case. If you have, specific questions on that, like I said, if you have an accountant or somebody like that you can talk it through, or if you want to call our support team and say, hey, this is our situation, like I said, we can't give accounting advice, but if you talk us through the situation, we can give you different options for how to set that up in the system and help you figure out the best way to record something. Yeah, thank you for that. That was a really good question. Okay, let's see what other questions we have. Some of them are about day-to-day operations or just suggestions, so I'm going to skip those for now, and I'll just reply to those. I'll just reply back via email after the webinar so that we can get your questions addressed that way. All right, so I'm going to, just because we do have a couple of minutes left for the hour, I will go through the first bank reconciliation so that we have that. And then if you have any other questions, I'll check the questions box again after we're done going through the first bank rec. And then we'll wrap it up. Okay, so bank reconciliation, we're going to be under the banking tab, and we're going to go to reconcile checkbook. Now, the first statement's going to look a little bit different. So basically, you're going to get your bank statement in the mail, or if you print it off from online or just have it on your computer. You'll put in your statement date, right? So we'll say this is our end of January statement for this year. Now, for the very first one, like I said, this is where it's going to be different. We do not put in a beginning balance on the statement. And the reason for that is because if you remember, we put in all of those beginning balances to populate our bank account in the system. We're basically going to treat those like deposits. So what happens is, and you can put in, the nice part is you don't even have to do journal entries for any interest or service charges, right? Like you can actually just put this right in here without worrying about debits and credits and that sort of a thing. So you put in any interest or service charges, and then what you do is you add your beginning balance amount to your total deposit on your first statement, right? So, and the hard part about demoing this is that I don't have a real bank account here with real numbers to show you, but let's say, for example, that we had, what was our beginning balance back from that window? Let's go grab it here. Oh, you know what? I have my balance sheet here. What was it? There we go. Okay. Nope, that was my building fund. Here it is. Okay, so it was 8520.03 was my beginning balance. And then let's just say I had $2,000 in deposits, just to make it a nice even number there. So what I would do is I would add those two numbers together, right? So 8520.03 plus 2,000, so that would be 10,520.03. Add those together, and then checks and other debits, right? So I would total up all of my checks. A lot of banks do that for you, which is really nice. So any checks and payments on that statement, you would put in the total there. So at this point, we're not even looking at things in the system yet, right? We're just looking at our bank statement and saying, hey, this is what was on my bank statement, and go ahead and save that. Really all the checkbook reconciliation is like, I don't know if anybody still does this because everything's online, right? But like when you get your bank statement in the mail and then you had your checkbook register, right? That little booklet that came with your checkbook from the bank, and you would put in a log file of all of your checks that you wrote out, right? And then you just go through and you would cross everything off on the statement to make sure that it cleared. Like this is really just an electronic fancy version of that, right? So we have our statement set up here. And then we click on it and we can click reconcile. So what we have is a list of all of our deposits on the left-hand side and a list of all of our checks on the right-hand side. And so like I said, at the beginning, our beginning balances are going to be treated as if they were deposits. So we're just automatically going to go through and mark all of these off, right? And then these were my outstanding checks. We'll just assume all of those cleared. Now at this point, I'm still missing, I'm missing a few deposits here, and I'm missing a few checks. So that might be, oh, you know what? I forgot to enter those into the system because I was just so busy, right? So I can say, okay, go back and enter those in here, and then I can come back and make sure everything's marked off, right? So it's really just a way to say, here's everything that was on my bank statement, make sure that it cleared in the system, or vice versa, right? That everything that was supposed to clear did clear the bank and check for fraud, right? That's a very prevalent thing these days as well. So it's pretty straightforward, right? And then if you need to, you can always save your work and come back to it. When you're all done and everything balances, then you can post your statement. Like I said, that's a little bit tricky to do when I'm making up all of these numbers. And then the following month then, right? The following month, that's when you would come and we'll do, for February, this is where you would then take your ending balance from the previous month, and that's your beginning balance for the next one. So after that, it's pretty straightforward, right? And you can go from there, again, enter interest or service charges. And from there. So next month, right, ending balance rolls over to beginning balance. It's just that first statement that's a little bit different. And feel free, right, if this is your first time coming in the system and doing a bank rec, feel free to call our support team. We're happy to walk you through that first bank reconciliation to make sure that everything reconciles for you. Okay, perfect. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Like I said, I recorded this. I'm going to be sending out a link to the recording as soon as it's available so that you can watch it again or share it with anybody else. Like I said, I did see a couple of questions coming through that weren't necessarily relevant to today's topic, so I'll get back to you within the next few days and just reply back to you via email one for one. If there's any of the handouts, like I said, they're in the handouts tab on your GoToWebinar control panel. If you can't find them for whatever reason, again, just email us. Let me pull up our contact information here. I believe most of you have all of this already, right? But here's our support phone number and our support email address. We are in the office on weekdays from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. So that'd be 6 to 3 Pacific or 9 to 6 Eastern if you're on the West Coast or East Coast. So yeah, like I said, any questions, or if you're that kind of person like me that, later in the day when you're driving home from the office and you have a question, say, oh, I should have asked that on the webinar, feel free to reach out to us. We're definitely happy to help with things like that. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone being here, especially on this gorgeous sunny day. We will talk to you soon.